So there I was, clutching a $470 fine for a bridge I built on my own damn land. 8 feet of my grandfather's 200-year-old barn timber spanning the creek in my backyard. When the HOA's power-drunk president click-clacked across my grass in her designer heels, waving that violation like she owned my soul. The air smelled of pine and freedom until Priscilla Blackwood opened her mouth. Unauthorized structure. Her illegal dock, jutting 10 feet into the exact same creek. Hypocrisy thicker than the morning fog. What she didn't know, she just declared war on a 30-year Army Corps of Engineers vet who builds bridges that outlast empires. 24 hours later, she was on her knees, sobbing in front of 300 neighbors, 4 live TV crews, and a county prosecutor sliding cuffs on her wrists. She fined a war hero for improving his own dirt. Biggest mistake of her life. Watch her empire burn in the next 24 minutes. My name's Garrett Thornfield, and 3 months ago I was a broken-down war veteran wondering why the hell I survived when better men didn't. 30 years building bridges under enemy fire. Iraq, Afghanistan, disaster zones, where one miscalculation meant body bags. Then my wife Sarah died of cancer while I was deployed, and suddenly this Purple Heart recipient was drinking himself to death in a cramped Denver apartment. Then Granddad's lawyer called. 5 acres of Colorado paradise, including a creek that's been running through Thornfield land since 1823. That bridge timber, cut from trees my great-great-grandfather felled by hand. 6 generations of sweat, dreams, and American grit soaked into every weathered plank. Sarah's dying wish. Build something beautiful in the mountains, Garrett. Something that lasts. So when I saw that creek separating the main property from the perfect spot for Sarah's memorial garden, I did what combat engineers do. I built a bridge. I built 8 feet of Granddad's ancient timber, joined with traditional mortise and tenon no nails, techniques learned from Afghan master craftsmen whose work survived centuries. The cedar shavings in my garage smelled like hope. For the first time since the funeral, I had purpose. My neighbor Dutch Vandenberg, retired contractor, salt of the earth, helped me install it. Finest craftsmanship I've seen in 40 years, he said. Built like a tank, pretty as a picture. For exactly 11 perfect days, I had peace. Coffee on the bridge at sunrise, talking to Sarah's memory while creek water babbled below and mountain air cleared the war ghosts from my head. Then the neighborhood dictator arrived. Priscilla Blackwood, fake blonde, real estate vulture, HOA president who rules Willowbrook Estates like her personal fiefdom. 6 years of terrorizing anyone who doesn't kiss her ring, drives a white BMW with sold for you vanity plates because subtlety isn't her strong suit. Mr. Thornfield, this structure violates community standards, she announced, photographing my bridge like evidence at a crime scene. Remove it immediately. It's on my private property, I said, keeping my voice level. I researched the bylaws. Her laugh could have stripped paint. Sweetie, I've run this HOA for 6 years. I know what's best for property values. Here's the kicker. And this is where my military intelligence training paid off. During my property survey, I'd already spotted her dirty little secret. A 10-foot deck jutting illegally into the same creek behind her McMansion. No permits, no HOA approval, pure hypocrisy. But she was about to learn something about picking fights with combat veterans. We don't start wars. We finish them. 2 days later, a certified letter landed in my mailbox like a mortar round with my address on it. Notice of violation, final warning. 48 hours to demolish my bridge, or face $100 per day fines plus legal action. They were threatening to bankrupt a disabled veteran for building a memorial to his dead wife on his own damn property. But Priscilla's first mistake was underestimating military intelligence training. The letter included surveillance photos of my bridge taken from impossible angles, specifically from Dutch's backyard tomato garden, which meant our HOA queen had been trespassing on private property, playing paparazzi with a telephoto lens like some deranged suburban spy. Dutch caught her in the act that very morning, crouched behind his prized beefsteaks with camera gear worth more than most people's cars. 40 years in construction, I've seen my share of power-drunk inspectors, Dutch growled, sipping coffee that could dissolve paint. But this woman's building dossiers on half the neighborhood, taking measurements, photographing violations that don't exist. She's got a special hard-on for you, though. Time for reconnaissance. That afternoon, I buried myself in county courthouse records, digging through HOA formation documents most homeowners never see. Turns out, those 30 years reading military contracts and engineering specs paid off in unexpected ways. The original 1987 covenants were crystal clear. Private property improvements not visible from public streets require no architectural review. My bridge. Hidden behind cottonwoods thick enough to stop small arms fire. Invisible unless you're standing on my back deck. But here's where it got beautiful. Priscilla had rubber-stamped identical violations for 3 of her real estate clients. Deck extensions, gazebos, even a hot tub pavilion that looked like Caesar's palace exploded in someone's backyard. All approved without question. Selective enforcement. The oldest tyranny in the book. I'd learned about Colorado's Common Interest Ownership Act during my property research. HOAs must follow their own procedures and treat residents equally. Document discrimination, expose it publicly, and watch corruption crumble under scrutiny. So I drafted 2 pages of polite, professional pushback citing property law, original covenants, and her pattern of selective enforcement. Then I hit reply all, town council, newspaper, every board member got copies. Nuclear option deployed. My phone exploded before I finished my second cup of coffee. How dare you embarrass this HOA with your grandstanding? Priscilla's voice could have stripped chrome off a bumper. You think copying the newspaper makes you some kind of hero? I think following the law makes me right, I said, finger hovering over my phone's record button. But thanks for the evidence. This call's being documented for legal purposes. Silence. Then dial tone. First blood drawn, but she doubled down harder than a desperate poker player. That afternoon brought a county code enforcement complaint. Unpermitted structure requiring professional engineering review. She was escalating to government authority, bringing the full weight of bureaucracy down on a grieving widower's memorial project. Time to show her what real firepower looks like. County Planning Office, 1 phone call. The clerk, Martha Rodriguez, knew Priscilla's reputation. Apparently, our HOA president had more enemies than allies in local government. Bridges under 10 feet on private property need 0 permits, Martha confirmed with barely concealed glee. Honey, your 8-footer is legal as Sunday church, and overbuilt to standards that'd make engineers weep with joy. That evening, I sat on my bridge with a beer, cottonwood leaves whispering overhead like nature's intelligence network. The creek bubbled secrets, and for the first time since Sarah's funeral, I felt genuinely hopeful. Dutch wandered over with his own beer and a contractor's knowing grin. Board meeting tomorrow night, he said. She needs unanimous approval for emergency enforcement. But half these people are tired of her drama. That Caesar's Palace hot tub she approved last year? Suddenly everyone's wondering why your memorial bridge is a crisis. The community was waking up. Nothing exposes hypocrisy like daylight and documentation. Tomorrow I'd start door-to-door diplomacy. Tonight I'd plan the campaign that would end Priscilla's reign of suburban terror. She picked the wrong veteran to wage war against. The emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled for Thursday night, and Priscilla spent the week campaigning like her life depended on it. Spoiler alert, it did. She knocked on every door in Willowbrook Estates, clutching a manila folder thick as a Bible and wearing her most concerned neighbor expression. The woman could have won Oscars for that performance, all trembling voice and crocodile tears about property values and community standards. But I'd been running my own operation with the kind of precision that wins wars. Tuesday morning, I visited the Henderson's Caesar's Palace hot tub pavilion. Linda answered in her bathrobe, coffee steaming in mountain air that smelled like pine needles and possibility. Mrs. Henderson, I'm Garrett Thornfield, beautiful backyard addition. Priscilla approved this last year. Her suspicious frown melted like spring snow. Oh, thank God, yes. That woman saved us from bureaucratic hell. My mother's dying wish was a hot tub pavilion, and Priscilla fast-tracked approval in 48 hours. I showed her photos of my bridge. Interesting, because she's threatening to bankrupt me for building my wife's memorial for exactly the same reasons she rubber-stamped your project. Linda's coffee mug shattered against her doorframe like my patience with HOA corruption. The pattern was uglier than Priscilla's fake blonde roots. Kawaguchi's next door, gazebo approved instantly after hiring Priscilla as their realtor. Patel's down the street, deck extension rubber-stamped the week they listed through her agency. Every single expedited approval came with real estate commissions flowing straight into Priscilla's designer purse. Pay the queen, get the permit, cross her, get crucified. Wednesday evening brought unexpected intelligence. Riley Santos appeared at my door looking like a CIA operative carrying nuclear secrets. Manila envelope clutched against her chest. This conversation never happened, Riley whispered, glancing around like snipers might be watching from the cottonwoods. But the county attorney's investigating HOA financial irregularities. Your bridge complaint triggered something much bigger. The envelope contained financial records that made my combat veteran blood run Arctic cold. Families who fought Priscilla's violations eventually sold their homes through her agency, always below market value, always to investors she represented. Systematic extortion disguised as community governance. There's more, Riley's voice dropped to barely audible. Missing HOA funds? Questionable expenditures? Embezzlement investigation? I can't say more, but Thursday night might be very interesting. Thursday arrived with tension thick enough to cut with a combat knife. The community center parking lot filled like a disaster evacuation, except everyone looked pissed instead of scared. I claimed a back row seat with clear sightlines to all exits, old habits from too many hostile briefings in too many dangerous countries. Dutch plopped down beside me, weathered face grimmer than a funeral director's business card. Feel that electricity in the air? Storm's coming, and our queen bee's about to get struck by lightning. Priscilla swept in wearing designer armor and matching arrogance, flanked by two board members who looked like they'd rather be getting root canals. Tonight we address a serious threat to community standards, she announced, voice echoing off cinderblock walls like a dictator addressing peasants. Mr. Thornfield's unauthorized structure undermines property values for every family here. Her PowerPoint presentation was Pentagon-quality aerial photography, property surveys, architectural impact studies. The woman had done her homework. But then Linda Henderson stood up, and you could hear democracy awakening. Priscilla, explain the precedent. Linda's voice carried the authority of someone who'd survived 3 teenagers and wasn't intimidated by suburban tyrants. You approved our pavilion in 2 days. What makes his memorial bridge different? The room temperature plummeted like Colorado winter had arrived early. Priscilla's face cycled through more colors than a neon sign having a seizure. Mrs. Henderson, your situation was architecturally different. The committee determined... The committee you chair? James Kawaguchi interrupted, standing like a man who'd found his backbone. The same committee that rubber-stamped our gazebo the week we hired you as our realtor? Game, set, match. The meeting exploded into open rebellion. Half the room demanded explanations for selective enforcement while Priscilla's allies started eyeing the exits like trapped rats. Her emergency motion to destroy my bridge died for lack of a second. You could hear her empire cracking like ice on a warming lake. And we were just getting started. Friday morning brought the kind of eerie silence that makes combat veterans check their six, that dead calm moment before the enemy launches their most desperate assault. Priscilla had vanished from her usual neighborhood patrol like a submarine going dark, but her white BMW sat in the driveway like a monument to impending doom. Dutch spotted her husband loading suitcases into a rental car at dawn, which painted a picture clearer than mountain air. Smart man's cutting his losses, Dutch observed over coffee strong enough to dissolve tank armor. Word from the courthouse is her real estate license triggered a state ethics investigation, professional suicide by selective enforcement. But our suburban dictator wasn't done fighting. Monday morning I woke to orange survey stakes driven into my front yard like tiny gravestones marking democracy's death. An official notice zip-tied to my mailbox announced that concerned community members had nominated Willowbrook Creek for environmental sensitive area designation. The brilliance of this attack made my military strategist brain grudgingly impressed. Environmental designation would require impact studies for existing structures within 50 feet of water. My bridge would need proof it wasn't disrupting fish migration, water flow, or endangered habitat. Months of bureaucratic hell and thousands in consulting fees designed to bankrupt resistance into submission. Evil genius meets scorched earth tactics. I called Jake Morrison, my old army buddy turned environmental consultant, who laughed hard enough to wake sleeping bears in neighboring counties. Garrett. Willowbrook Creek is classified intermittent waterway with minimal ecological impact. That thing runs dry half the year and supports about as much wildlife as a Walmart parking lot. Whoever filed this request thinks you're either stupid or too poor to fight back. Wrong on both counts, sweetheart. Jake reviewed the filing for beer money and war story rights. What he discovered was incompetence so beautiful it belonged in a comedy museum. The environmental impact claim cited disruption of native fish spawning in a creek containing 0 fish species. It referenced endangered bird habitat near cottonwoods that housed nothing more exotic than magpies with attitude problems and crows plotting garbage can raids. But here's where desperation revealed fatal stupidity. Environmental filings require disclosure of all structures in the proposed area. Priscilla had accidentally omitted her 10-foot illegal dock jutting into the same creek she suddenly wanted to protect, either perjury or the kind of oversight that destroys legal careers. This filing has more holes than Swiss cheese and less scientific credibility than astrology, Jake declared with professional glee. Any review board would laugh it out of Colorado. Then Tuesday brought Marcus Webb. The Mountain Gazette's investigative bloodhound had been tracking municipal corruption leads when my situation kept surfacing like a recurring nightmare in city officials' conversations. Mr. Thornfield, multiple sources suggest HOA financial misconduct, commercial enforcement abuse, and now environmental law violations, Marcus said, digital recorders spinning like truth-seeking machinery. The story's growing legs. Mind if I interview the other targeted families? I handed him everything, documentation thick as phone books, witness statements, Jake's professional demolition of the environmental fraud, and a timeline that read like a corruption masterclass. We're not looking at neighborhood politics anymore, Marcus said, scrolling through evidence with Hunter's intensity. This is systematic abuse of governmental authority for personal profit, front-page material. Wednesday's Mountain Gazette detonated across Willowbrook Estates like a tactical nuke. HOA corruption exposed, environmental laws abused to target Veterans Memorial, dominated the front page with aerial photos comparing my bridge to Priscilla's illegal dock. The article dissected her enforcement patterns, ongoing financial investigations, and the environmental fraud that spectacularly backfired. My phone started ringing like emergency dispatch during a natural disaster. Denver TV stations, radio shows, even a producer from a national news magazine interested in HOA abuse stories. But Thursday morning brought the real explosion. County environmental officials arrived with inspection equipment and federal authority badges, looking like they meant business deadlier than war crimes tribunals. Filing false environmental claims involving waterways triggers federal investigation when it attempts to manipulate government resources. Priscilla's desperate gambit had summoned inspectors who would examine every structure along Willowbrook Creek with forensic precision. Standing on my bridge, watching officials measure her dock like crime scene evidence, morning mist rising around them like courtroom drama, I inhaled the sweet scent of justice finally arriving. The hunter had become the hunted, and hunting season was officially open. That Thursday evening, Dutch appeared at my door looking like a man carrying nuclear launch codes, clutching a manila envelope thick enough to stop bullets and wearing the expression of someone who'd just discovered buried treasure. "Garrett, what I'm about to show you will end Priscilla's war," he said, voice barely above a whisper, as mountain wind rustled through cottonwoods like nature's own intelligence network. "But once you see this, there's no going back." Under Sarah's favorite kitchen lamp, the one that always made her smile during late-night crossword puzzles, Dutch spread documents across my table like evidence at a war crimes tribunal. The papers rustled with the sound of empires crumbling. "Remember when I said I'd been documenting Priscilla's irregularities?" Dutch's weathered hands trembled slightly as he arranged bank statements in chronological order. "Well, I found something that makes her bridge harassment look like jaywalking. The numbers hit me like incoming mortars. $30,000. Embezzled. Over 3 years. From HOA accounts that were supposed to fund community improvements, not Priscilla's designer lifestyle. Legal consulting fees, paid to her personal LLC for services that never existed. Emergency landscaping contracts, awarded to her brother-in-law at triple market rates for work that was never performed. Architectural review consulting billed to a company that existed only in her imagination, and a P.O. box in downtown Denver. Holy shit, I breathed, studying bank transfers that showed HOA money flowing into Priscilla's business accounts like a river feeding a private lake. "How long has this been going on?" Dutch's smile could have powered the entire subdivision. "Since month 2 of her presidency. The woman's been treating our dues like her personal ATM, and she's gotten sloppy about covering tracks." But the real gut punch came with the second revelation. She'd been using embezzled funds to finance her enforcement reign of terror. Private investigators hired with stolen money to dig dirt on resistant homeowners. Legal threats drafted by attorneys paid from HOA accounts. Even surveillance equipment purchased through fraudulent security upgrades that never materialized. We'd been funding our own oppression. "There's your motive," I said, pieces clicking together like puzzle parts finding their perfect fit. "She's not just protecting her authority, she's covering up federal crimes." Dutch nodded grimly. "Annual audits due in 6 weeks. Independent accountants will spot these discrepancies faster than you can say embezzlement. She needs that money replaced or she's facing prison time." The timeline made sickening sense now. My bridge complaint hadn't just challenged her power, it had threatened to expose a criminal enterprise built on community trust and neighbors' dues. Every escalation, every desperate attack, every increasingly unhinged move was the behavior of someone watching their house of cards collapse in slow motion. But here's the beautiful part, Dutch continued, pulling out a document that made everything else look like opening acts. She doesn't know that I know, or that Riley Santos has already triggered a county investigation. The letter from the county attorney's office was poetry written in legal language, formal notice of criminal investigation into financial irregularities, potential embezzlement, and abuse of fiduciary responsibility within Willowbrook Estates HOA. The feds were already circling like vultures sensing fresh carrion. "Annual meetings in 2 weeks," Dutch said with the satisfaction of a man holding 4 aces. "Mandatory financial reporting to membership. She'll have to present books she knows are cooked to an audience that includes families she's stolen from." Standing in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence of systematic theft and corruption, I felt something surge through me that I hadn't experienced since Sarah's funeral. Absolute moral clarity about right and wrong. Priscilla had built her empire on lies, theft, and the intimidation of grieving widowers trying to honor their dead wives. Time to watch that empire burn in front of every person she'd ever terrorized. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and hunting season was officially declared open. Friday morning, my kitchen transformed into a war room that would have made General Patton weep with pride. Dutch arrived at dawn, clutching coffee strong enough to resurrect the dead and wearing the expression of a man ready to topple governments. 13 days until the annual meeting, he announced, spreading neighborhood maps across my table like invasion routes. Time to build a coalition that'll make Priscilla wish she'd stayed in whatever hell spawned her. The smell of bacon grease and righteous anger filled the mountain air as we planned the systematic destruction of a suburban dictatorship. Riley Santos arrived for breakfast looking like a CIA operative about to defect with nuclear secrets. Over eggs that sizzled like Priscilla's future career prospects, she dropped intelligence that made our embezzlement evidence look like petty theft. "Federal mail fraud charges are being considered," Riley whispered, glancing toward Priscilla's house like snipers might be watching from the windows. She used postal services to send fraudulent legal threats financed with stolen money. "That's orange jumpsuit territory." Dutch's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. "How orange are we talking? 10 to 20 years orange? Federal prison? Career destruction? Life-ending orange?" No wonder Priscilla was acting like a cornered rattlesnake with nothing left to lose. Over the weekend, I launched Operation Neighborhood Justice with the precision of Special Forces recruiting resistance fighters. Every family she'd terrorized, every neighbor tired of her suburban fascism, every homeowner ready to reclaim their democracy. The Hendersons signed on immediately after learning their beloved pavilion approval had cost the HOA $3,000 in fictional consulting fees. Linda's fury could have melted steel when she realized Priscilla had stolen community money to approve the project that made her grateful. "That manipulative succubus played us like cheap fiddles," Linda snarled, signing witness statements with enough force to crack my kitchen table. "I'll testify at that meeting if I have to drag myself there with broken legs." The Kawaguchis brought documentation showing how their expedited review had involved billing phantom architectural consultations that existed only in Priscilla's criminal imagination. Their gratitude had been purchased with their neighbors' stolen dues. By Monday, 17 families had joined our rebellion. 17 voices ready to turn the annual meeting into a public tribunal with Queen Priscilla as the star defendant. Tuesday brought Marcus Webb armed with camera equipment and the predatory smile of an investigative journalist smelling career-making story potential. "This has gone national," Marcus announced, setting up recording gear with military efficiency while afternoon sunlight streamed through my windows like courtroom drama lighting. "CNN wants interviews. Property rights groups are calling this landmark HOA corruption. You're about to become the face of fighting suburban tyranny." The media strategy was beautiful in its simplicity. Maximum exposure, maximum pressure, maximum humiliation for our neighborhood dictator. Every interview would add another nail to Priscilla's professional coffin. Wednesday, Dutch unveiled his tactical masterpiece with the satisfaction of a general revealing secret weapons. Community center capacity, 50 people. Current RSVP count over 200. His grin could have powered the entire subdivision. "I've arranged Willowbrook High Auditorium capacity 400 professional sound system and security cameras that'll record every moment of her public execution. Local TV crews, county commissioners, state investigators, this wouldn't be just an HOA meeting anymore. This would be the most televised destruction of a corrupt official in Colorado history. Thursday brought our nuclear option, legal representation. Sarah Riley, civil rights attorney who specialized in destroying HOA corruption, reviewed our evidence with the intensity of a prosecutor building death penalty cases. Her assessment was pure music. 15 years fighting HOA abuse, and this is the most comprehensive documentation of systematic corruption I've ever seen, Sarah declared, scrolling through financial records that painted Priscilla's crimes in vivid detail. Embezzlement, fraud, extortion, constitutional violations, she's committed more felonies than most crime syndicates. But Sarah's real genius was constitutional framework. Your bridge isn't just property rights, she explained with growing excitement that made her voice crack like a teenager's. Memorial expression, veterans' rights, equal protection, this case could revolutionize HOA law nationwide. Friday evening found me on my bridge. Ancient timber solid beneath my feet while creek water whispered secrets and pine-scented air carried the promise of impending victory. 13 days of strategic preparation had transformed personal grievance into community uprising backed by legal firepower, media attention, and federal investigation. The battle was planned with military precision. The allies were assembled like freedom fighters ready for revolution. The evidence was overwhelming enough to convict dictators. Time to watch suburban tyranny burn in democracy's cleansing fire. Saturday morning brought the kind of ominous silence that precedes enemy counterattacks. Priscilla's white BMW had vanished from her driveway, replaced by a black Escalade with tinted windows that screamed, "Desperate times call for expensive measures." Dutch spotted the first sign of trouble during his morning dog walk, a van marked Heritage Property Inspections parked outside my gate, equipped with enough surveillance gear to monitor small countries. "They're not here for your bridge," Dutch warned, appearing at my door with his German Shepherd and the expression of a man who'd seen enemy reconnaissance before. Professional outfit, expensive equipment, and they're photographing everything from your mailbox to your septic system. The inspection van was pure theater designed to intimidate, but Priscilla's real attack came through channels more devious than surveillance. Monday morning, I discovered orange tags zip-tied to my bridge posts claiming structural safety violation, immediate closure required. The county inspector's signature looked official until you noticed it belonged to Robert Blackwood, P.E., Priscilla's brother-in-law, whose engineering license had expired 3 years ago according to state records. The fake inspection report was amateur hour incompetence wrapped in official-looking letterhead, claims of insufficient load-bearing capacity for a bridge that could support tank traffic, foundation instability in footings sunk into bedrock that predated the last ice age, material degradation in timber that would outlast the pyramids. But here's where desperation revealed criminal stupidity. The fraudulent inspection violated state engineering regulations, professional licensing laws, and federal mail fraud statutes. Robert Blackwood was about to discover that impersonating a licensed professional engineer carries penalties that make embezzlement look like parking tickets. I called Jake Morrison, who examined the fake report with professional disgust that could have curdled fresh milk. "Garrett, this inspection's so fraudulent it's insulting to actual fraud," Jake declared, reviewing technical claims that violated basic physics. "The engineering calculations are wrong, the safety codes are outdated, and the inspector's license expired during the Obama administration." Jake's professional assessment would destroy the fake inspection in any legitimate review process. But Priscilla wasn't playing by legitimate rules anymore. Tuesday brought escalation that crossed lines even I didn't expect. A process server appeared at my door with legal papers thick as phone books, and expressions that suggested he'd rather be serving divorce papers to angry bikers. The lawsuit demanded $50,000 in damages for willful violation of community standards, plus immediate bridge removal and legal fees that would bankrupt most families. The legal filing read like fiction written by someone whose only courtroom experience came from television reruns. Claims that my bridge endangered community property values despite zero evidence of market impact. Allegations of environmental destruction in a creek that supported less wildlife than a suburban swimming pool. But the real criminal masterstroke was financial. Priscilla had hired the law firm using HOA funds embezzled from the same accounts she'd been systematically looting. She was literally using stolen money to finance lawsuits against the victims of her theft. The circular criminality was so audacious it bordered on genius. Wednesday evening brought intelligence that changed everything. Dutch appeared at my door with information that made nuclear secrets look like grocery lists. His expression carried the weight of someone bearing news that would topple governments. "She's trying to buy her way out," Dutch announced, settling into my kitchen like a spy debriefing mission commanders. "Spotted her at First National Bank this morning with a briefcase and the kind of paperwork that suggests major financial transactions." The intelligence network Dutch had cultivated through 40 years of neighborhood construction work paid dividends that would make CIA operatives jealous. Bank employees, courthouse clerks, municipal workers, everyone talked to the guy who'd fixed their decks and knew their family histories. Word from my source inside the bank: she's attempting to secure a personal loan large enough to replace the embezzled HOA funds before the annual audit, Dutch continued with satisfaction that could have powered small appliances. $30,000 secured against her house, with payments that'll cripple her financially for decades. The desperation move revealed how completely we'd cornered her. Replace stolen money with borrowed funds, hope the audit passes without deeper investigation, pray the federal mail fraud charges disappear through financial restitution. But here's where karma delivered its most beautiful justice. Her loan application was rejected faster than bad checks at a police convention. 3 years of embezzlement had destroyed her credit rating, while the ongoing federal investigation made banks treat her like radioactive waste. No legitimate financial institution would touch her with stolen money. Thursday morning brought the sound of moving trucks and the sweet smell of enemies in full retreat. Through my kitchen window, I watched Priscilla's husband loading furniture like a man escaping a plague zone. Boxes labeled urgent, suitcases thrown rather than packed, and the general chaos of people fleeing consequences they can no longer avoid. Standing on my bridge that evening, watching the sun set over mountains that had witnessed generations of Thornfield perseverance, I felt the deep satisfaction of justice approaching with the inevitability of mountain weather. Priscilla had played every desperate card in her deck and lost each hand more spectacularly than the last. Fake inspections, fraudulent lawsuits, attempted financial manipulation, each move had only deepened the hole she was digging toward her own destruction. 8 days until the annual meeting that would serve as her public execution. The hunted had become the hunter, and hunting season was about to reach its climactic conclusion. Friday morning brought the kind of eerie desperation that makes combat veterans check their weapons and scan for ambush positions. The moving trucks had vanished from Priscilla's driveway, but her BMW remained like a fortress under siege, and the smell of impending defeat hung in the Colorado air thicker than morning fog. Dutch arrived with intelligence that made my coffee taste like victory and defeat simultaneously. "She's gone full scorched earth," he announced, settling into my kitchen with the expression of someone who'd witnessed the enemy's final desperate gambit. "Her husband fled to his mother's house in Phoenix. The house is up for sale, and she's liquidating everything that isn't nailed down." But a cornered animal fights dirtiest when escape routes disappear. Monday brought an attack so audacious it bordered on criminal insanity. I discovered my bridge cordoned off with yellow caution tape like a crime scene, complete with official-looking signs declaring hazardous structure, authorized personnel only. A security guard who looked like he'd been hired from the local unemployment line sat in a folding chair, clipboard in hand, playing protector of public safety. "Ma'am says you can't cross," the guard mumbled, avoiding eye contact like a man who knew he was participating in theater that would make community college drama departments cringe. "Structure's been declared unsafe pending proper engineering review." The beautiful irony was that Priscilla had hired private security to guard my own bridge on my own property, using money she'd embezzled from accounts that belonged to the neighbors she was supposedly protecting. I called Dutch, who arrived with bolt cutters and the kind of righteous anger that levels mountains. "Private security on private property without owner consent is trespassing," Dutch declared, snipping caution tape with the satisfaction of cutting enemy communication lines. That rent-a-cop's about to learn the difference between legitimate authority and suburban theater. The security guard retreated faster than French forces in 1940 when faced with actual property law and a retired contractor who dealt with more authority figures than a career military officer. But Priscilla's desperation had reached levels that would make clinical psychologists weep with professional fascination. Tuesday evening brought her final, most dangerous gambit. I answered my phone to hear a voice so artificially sweet it could have caused diabetes in laboratory mice. Priscilla Blackwood, attempting charm like a cobra, trying to sing lullabies. "Garrett, honey, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot," she cooed with the authenticity of a $3 bill. "Why don't we sit down like adults and work out a mutually beneficial solution to our little misunderstanding? The little misunderstanding that involved embezzlement, fraud, fake inspections, fraudulent lawsuits, and systematic harassment of a grieving veteran trying to honor his dead wife's memory. "I'm listening," I said, hitting record on my phone app with the practiced ease of someone who'd learned to document enemy communications during 3 decades of military service. "Well, I've been thinking. Your bridge is actually quite charming, and maybe our community standards have been a bit rigid. What if I were to personally ensure your structure gets retroactive approval, and perhaps we could discuss a modest settlement for any inconvenience you've experienced?" The settlement amount she proposed was exactly $30,000, the precise sum she'd embezzled from HOA accounts. "Think of it as a fresh start for everyone involved," she continued, voice dripping with the kind of fake sincerity that wouldn't fool kindergartners. "You get to keep your memorial, I get to move past this unfortunate chapter, and the community benefits from reduced legal expenses." She was literally attempting to bribe me with stolen money to withdraw the complaints that would expose her theft of the money she was trying to bribe me with. The circular criminality was so audacious it qualified as performance art. "That's an interesting offer," I replied, letting her dig the hole deeper. "Can I have a few days to consider the terms?" "Of course, honey. But the annual meeting's approaching and timing is... Well, you understand how these things work." Wednesday morning, I delivered the recorded conversation to Sarah Riley, who listened with the expression of a prosecutor receiving confession videos from serial killers. "Mr. Thornfield, she just committed attempted bribery, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice on a recorded line," Sarah said with the barely contained excitement of someone watching their opponent commit suicide in real time. This conversation alone could add 5 years to her federal sentence. But the most beautiful justice was yet to come. Thursday brought news that the county investigation had expanded into federal territory. Mail fraud charges were now officially pending, with additional counts for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The FBI's white-collar crime task force had taken interest in a case that showcased systematic abuse of quasi-governmental authority. That evening, sitting on my bridge while purple sunset painted the mountains like nature's own victory celebration, I watched moving trucks return to Priscilla's house. Not to pack belongings this time, but to repossess furniture, and belongings that creditors were seizing to cover debts she could no longer hide. The woman who'd tried to destroy a veteran's memorial to his dead wife was losing everything she'd stolen and everything she'd built on the foundation of community theft. 4 days until the annual meeting that would serve as her public trial, sentencing, and execution. The hunter had successfully become the hunted, and hunting season was about to reach its spectacular conclusion in front of 400 witnesses and live television coverage. Justice was coming like an avalanche, and Priscilla Blackwood was standing directly in its path. Monday evening arrived with the electric tension of a thunderstorm about to unleash hell on earth. The Willowbrook High School auditorium buzzed with an energy that could have powered the entire county, as 400 residents packed seats designed for graduation ceremonies and basketball celebrations, not the public execution of suburban tyrants. I arrived 30 minutes early to find the parking lot resembling a media circus crossed with a political rally. 3 local TV news vans bristled with satellite equipment while reporters interviewed neighbors who looked like they'd been waiting years for this moment. The smell of anticipation mixed with mountain air and the faint aroma of popcorn from the concession stand that someone had brilliantly decided to open for the occasion. Dutch met me at the auditorium entrance, wearing his best funeral suit and the expression of a general about to witness enemy surrender. "Capacity crowd plus standing room," he reported with satisfaction that could have melted steel. County commissioners in the front row, state investigators in Section B, and enough media coverage to make presidential debates jealous. The stage was set like a courtroom drama, complete with a projection screen for financial documents and a sound system that would broadcast every word to the back rows, where overflow crowds stood like spectators at a public hanging. Priscilla entered at exactly 7 p.m. through the rear doors, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be defending serial killers, and a personal assistant who kept checking her phone like she expected evacuation orders. The woman who'd terrorized our neighborhood for 6 years appeared smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of impending justice and the hostile stares of 400 people she'd wronged. Her designer suit couldn't hide the tremor in her hands or the way her eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal seeking escape routes that didn't exist. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the annual meeting of Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association," Priscilla announced, her voice echoing through speakers that amplified every nervous quaver. "Tonight we'll review our financial position and address community concerns. The irony was so thick you could have cut it with a combat knife. Riley Santos stood first, holding a microphone that transformed her from quiet town council member into prosecutor at a public trial. Mrs. Blackwood, before we discuss finances, I believe the community deserves answers about the ongoing federal investigation into HOA financial irregularities. The auditorium fell silent except for the whisper of camera shutters and the scratch of reporters' pens capturing history in real time. Priscilla's face cycled through more colors than a neon sign having a seizure. That investigation is preliminary, routine oversight. Nothing that affects our community operations.
Nothing routine about $30,000 in embezzled funds, Dutch called out from the middle section, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd built half the neighborhood and earned the right to speak truth to power. The auditorium erupted like a dam bursting under pressure. 17 families stood simultaneously, voices overlapping in a chorus of accusations, evidence, and fury that had been building for years. The Hendersons demanding explanations for fake consulting fees, the Kawaguchis waiving documentation of fraudulent architectural reviews, the Patels holding bank statements that showed money flowing from community accounts into